and welcome back to the No Score Review Show. This is a brand new series coming to the channel where we're going to do franchise in reviews overall in anticipation for the latest installment in the franchise coming out. At least that's the plan with this one anyway. We're reviewing the Indiana Jones franchise today. I am your host, Nick Green, and joining me today is Shay Martin. Welcome back, Shay.
Thanks, Nick. I'm super excited. Indiana Jones is like what got me into movies.
We are being one-upped by your showmanship for your love of the franchise already. It's on full display, which I love to see.
Yeah.
And also joining us is Cole Parkinson. Cole, welcome back.
Hello. Thanks for having me back. It's good to be here.
We're slowly building out your dimensions past just being a Last of Us fan.
Yeah. So was it the second franchise I'm a part of? So I guess it's not too bad.
You were around for God of War.
I was. That's right. Yeah. So 3,
so
not bad.
Slowly. Yeah,
exactly. Just
slowly
wait. We'll get another season and then multiplayer. And so I've booked it already. We're good to go. I'm ready for the next Last of Us podcast already.
You're slotted in indefinitely, so
yes.
It's fine. We're working on a system of like a one for them, one for us type situation where it's for every one Last of Us recording we can do something else.
I get added to another list. Awesome. So yeah. There we go. So I still got one more on the go, I think. So we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, we are reviewing the Indiana Jones franchise. Dial of Destiny is coming out June 30th. So I wanted to revisit the franchise in celebration of that. And there's this series is a work in progress. So we're going to kind of feel out how the format of the show will go going forward. But to start, we'll just kind of talk about our general thoughts on the franchise as a whole, what our history with it is, how we came to find out about it and watch it and whatnot. And I think it's probably safe to say full spoilers for the first 4 films of this franchise. They've been out for decades now for some of them. All of them now, I guess. Even Crystal Skull is getting up there in age now, which is weird.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But so full spoilers. So if you haven't seen them, this is your official spoiler warning. Let's get into it. Shay, how did you get into the Indiana Jones franchise?
When I was 9, my parents had gotten me like the original Xbox for Christmas, and it came in a bundle with the video game Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb. I think it's like a 2003 game. And I was 9 years old and it was rated teen. So my parents were like, this is way too mature for you. So they got me like other games. But I remember because I couldn't play this game, I had no idea it was a franchise. I had no idea what it was even about. But just looking at the cover, I knew obviously it was an adventure game. And I was like, I wanted to play it. My dad started playing it and he became obsessive over it. And it was kind of one of those things where every evening he was playing it down in the basement and I would come and sneak and watch it a little bit. And then he'd be like, okay, fine. Like you can watch me play the game. And because it was an Indiana Jones game, you're being taken to like all these different worlds. And from like a 9-year-old perspective, like it was just so much fun watching him play.
Blew your mind, probably.
Yeah,
right?
for sure. I was just like obsessed with this game. I made my friends play like Indiana Jones on the playground. I made like plays for my parents that were Indiana Jones based.
Oh my god!
Skipping rope as a whip, but
nice.
This is like a year of obsession, and my parents never even told me that it was a movie franchise.
Oh my god,
that's hilarious.
Yeah, like they watched me do all these plays for them and everything, and they must have been so tired. And I don't know if they just like strategically never told me that it was also a movie franchise.
We gotta keep this from them as long as we can.
Exactly.
The biggest secret.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So by the time I found out, I begged my dad to go to like the Blockbuster to rent Raiders, and it just snowballed from there. Raiders and the Last Crusade was the only ones that they would let me watch. Temple of Doom they didn't want me to watch because of its
Yeah, that
graphic
one's a little more
content.
intense.
Yeah. So again, became obsessive over wanting to see the second movie. And then I think it was like I think I was in grade 5. My birthday party was coming around, and a friend at school bought me the second movie. And
Nice.
I watched it without their permission, and I had nightmares for so long. So yeah, it was always something that was like near and dear to my heart. When the Crystal Skull came out, what year was that? I think I was still like 2008.
2008?
Yeah,
I think it was
2008.
8. Huh.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so I was in grade 8 when that came out then, and I was with one of my very last boyfriends that I've ever had, and we went to go see it in theaters, and I was like really excited, and I just remember he wanted to like make out the entire movie, and I'm like,
Oh,
you're
no.
here with the wrong
Bad
person.
move, dude.
Yeah.
The wrong
You're here
film.
yeah, for many reasons, but mostly just not this
True.
movie. And yeah, it was just like one of those things where it was just a really big influence in my childhood. We didn't travel a lot growing up, so I lived a lot of like my adventure through like imagination and movies and games. And when by the time I moved out at 18, I went to school to study archaeology. Have since
Really?
learned,
Oh my god.
It's
yeah,
awesome.
my degree
Damn.
is in archaeology, but I have since learned its roots and how problematic it's a pretty problematic field of study as
Right.
long as it like that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, it's just I'm really excited for Dial of Destiny. My expectations of it is no more than Crystal Skull. Yeah,
That's healthy. That's good.
yeah, that's my
Yeah.
history with the entire franchise.
And real quick, do you have a favorite film in the saga?
Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's on my wall. It's on my shirt.
Right. Yes, of course. Could have guessed.
Well, yeah, for the listeners who's maybe just listening to it on Spotify.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shay is adorned in Indiana Jones apparel and merch.
It's everywhere. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's everywhere. Cool. Cole, same question. How did you get into Indiana Jones?
Kind of similar, a little bit different. We had I would have been what? It would have been 2007, so I would have been 12. We went to Disneyland. Then when the rope drops, we went, what is it, right or left? I think it was left. And the first ride there is Indiana Jones. I had never seen the movies. I'd seen posters at like friends' houses, and my uncle's friend had a huge Raiders, pretty much the exact same poster you have on your wall. And I remember looking at it being like, oh, that's cool, whatever. We rode that ride probably 15 times when we were there. I loved it. I like every time we went by, I was like, I'm going on. I don't care if anyone else is coming with me. I'm going. So we got back, I don't know, a week later or whatever, and I was like, okay, I need to watch these movies. So my dad went to Blockbuster, kind of the same thing. He rented all 3 of them. I watched them the entire week. I remember we played hockey in Bassano on like a Friday night, and I was watching Temple of Doom on the way there and on the way back. And then, yeah, it was just crazy. And then I was kind of lucky because then, of course, Crystal Skull came out, I don't know, a couple months later. It wasn't too long. So I really didn't have that huge wait like a lot of people did. So yeah. Totally. And then same thing. I have a hat. I it's not here, I guess. I must have left it on my parents because I didn't want to get crushed in the move. And it's way too small. Yeah. I bought it when I was 13, so it does not fit anymore. It would have been like standing on top of my head. So it's probably best that it's not here. And yeah, I think, do you remember when I went as Indiana Jones? Were you at that college party? I think it was our second year.
I don't know if I went to that party.
Okay. Yeah. So I went as Indiana Jones. I've went multiple times just because it's the easy one. I have the hat and everything already. So yeah. It's Raiders of the Lost Ark is my favorite movie. It has been since I was 12 when I saw it. So yeah. And then I guess expectations. I mean, I think they're a little lower than what they were originally just from reviews and whatnot. But I mean, I'm still gonna go see it. I can't wait.
Right.
And I mean,
Yeah.
it's the last one. It's kind of bittersweet, but at the same time, I don't necessarily need to see Harrison Ford out there as a 100-year-old and
Yeah.
doing the indie stuff. So we'll see.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what they do after, because obviously they're not gonna let it die. It's Disney, so we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very cool. I have a similar history, much like both of you. It's a little more foggy though, because I think my parents might have just owned one of the box sets that came out in the like early to mid 2000s, and that's how I stumbled upon it. I think it probably also had some roots with my love for like the Jurassic Park films and like Star Wars and stuff. Like they're all kind of within that same movie magic era. So yeah, the actual origin of when I watched them is a little fuzzy, but I know I would count on like countless times bring them along for road trips whenever we would visit family in a different province. I would do the marathon of what at the time was Raiders through to Last Crusade. Um, and I think I might have been too young to go see Crystal Skull in theaters, but I know we definitely rented it like from a Blockbuster at one point. And like kind of like you, Shay, I had like the generation after. My first Xbox 360 came as a bundle with Lego Indiana Jones.
Nice.
So I got to play through all of that, which was great. Also, side note, very like one of the best Lego games because it's like beat for beat every single
movie,
of one of the movies, which is really good. But yeah, I would bring them along for road trips all the time. I think I probably stumbled upon it in my parents' movie collection because I think they enjoyed it enough that it was like a fun adventure film for them. Yeah, I would say it's been a long time since I've actually watched the films again, and I just did the rewatch in anticipation of Dial of Destiny. But yeah, I always held those films near and dear to my heart. I think I had an interchangeable hat, which I used for both playing Indiana Jones and for playing Alan Grant from the Jurassic Park films. Multi-purpose hat.
Efficient.
So yeah, I would do that a lot as well. And yeah, I rewatching these films. There's a lot to love. There's definitely some things when we'll get into the like highlights and lowlights of each of them that stick out like a sore thumb. But overall, I still really enjoy them. I would say upon the rewatch as well that Last Crusade is probably my all-time favorite now.
fair
Like
enough.
Raiders has that iconography for sure, and that like classic Indiana Jones like feel. Like obviously it's the first one and everything, but Last Crusade I think is just like one of the best sequels ever to like make or use what the first film did and like elevate it beyond in terms of quality for me. So
I feel like a lot of people, when you ask their favorite movie, it's always very equally tied between Raiders and Last Crusade.
totally, yeah. And then you all kind of have a consensus on being like Temple of Doom is not
third.
that great. Yeah,
Definitely.
and it's a trilogy, right? It's not. It's nothing more than that.
I guess.
But like actually, speaking of which, like I rewatched Crystal Skull as well just to give it a fair shake with the others, and like just as a quick general thoughts type review, it's actually still pretty good. Like they nailed the feel of Indiana Jones film, and it's got some like cool set pieces. I think conceptually it's very good, but the some of the execution maybe is a little bit squandered. But yeah,
it's not nearly as bad as people give it. Like some of the Star Wars movies are way worse, and people love those. Like now the prequels, somehow people love those. It's like, but Kingdom of Crystal Skull still gets shit on. I don't know. It's not nearly as good as the first three, but it's still not like the 0 out of 10 that a lot of people give it. So
yeah,
totally.
Honestly, like in my Letterboxd review, I kind of like put it on the same level as Temple of Doom, and just because of like I think Temple of Doom is like way less quality for me now because of like a lot of the like it didn't age well like at all. So it's like pretty on par with Crystal Skull for me now. They're just kind of interchangeable in their shortcomings.
Yeah.
But yeah, like when you compare it to the likes of like the Star Wars prequels and everything, it's definitely way more consistent throughout its runtime, and like it doesn't have the atrocious dialogue that the
Yeah.
prequels did. And like the really shoddy CGI, like the effects are
There is some
definitely
bad
better.
stuff in there though. Yeah.
There's some bad stuff for sure, but like
Gophers.
it's definitely, you can see like baby steps of improvements over those for sure. But yeah, I guess with that we can kind of do we could start our deep dive into each film and kind of just go over some of our highlights and lowlights for each of them, and we'll do it in release order. So we'll start with both of your favorite films, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Cole, do you want to kick things off with some of your highlights in that film?
Sure. I mean, from start to finish, I love this movie. I mean, just the opening sequence where they kind of hide Harrison Ford and don't really show his face until he
Yeah.
kind of turns around. That is so good. The whole opening
Mm-hmm.
sequence with the boulder is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many great pieces in this movie that I love. Like, yeah, I mean, some of the CGI at the end might not hold up, but even then at the time, like, it still kind of makes me laugh with like the melting faces and the ghosts and
Yeah,
whatnot.
yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those movies that is kickstarted kind of that action adventure kind of type feel movie that a lot of people have tried to create after that. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, from acting to writing to basically everything, it's one of those movies that I think is perfect. Like, is there some stuff that's maybe not as good as movies today in terms of CGI and that kind of stuff, but even then, like, it's so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, I would say like specifically with that ending, like it's still like I don't feel like anything today, like even in the past 10 years, has come close of feeling like evoking that feeling that they were able to convey with the special effects. Like
Mm,
it just looks so unique with the way ILM did it and everything.
yeah,
Like it there's just a stark difference between special effects and visual effects that you just can't recreate, which is really
yeah,
cool. And I think it has stood the test of time with those scenes in particular. I would say probably like with that scene, it's maybe some of the like ghosts that fly around that looks a little more shoddy.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
But I
yeah,
mean, it was what, 82, like early 80s. So I mean, you can't really
yeah,
fault it if you're gonna look at that. I mean, yeah.
yeah,
And then
exactly.
side characters in this one is great. Like, you see Sala for the first time, Marion. Yeah, I
Hmm.
mean, iconic characters that you are introduced to in the first time, and they nailed it with pretty much everything. So
Yeah,
you know,
I would completely agree. Definitely some really memorable characters and arguably the most memorable set pieces. Like nearly every scene and every location
mm,
for sure has at least one like super memorable set piece, which
yeah,
is really cool. And varying degrees of size as well. Like everything from the pistol duel, sword fight, pistol duel,
yeah.
to like the opening sequence, right? So good. Um, Shay, do you have any highlights or lowlights you want to point out with Raiders?
It's really hard to like pinpoint like specific highlights. Like the I always as a kid really loved the chase sequence in Cairo of
Hmm.
Marion and Indy. I forget who they were running from. They were running. No, Marion was kidnapped, and then
Yeah,
Indy
Yeah,
was
she was
chasing
in the
after.
basket.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the comedy in that film is just so good, and it's silly,
Yeah.
and it doesn't take itself out too seriously, but it does at the right moments.
Mm.
As you said, Cole, like the effects, they aged fairly well for a 1981 film.
Yeah.
It's a good example of how mixing practical effects with like the visual effects, I think. I don't know. I sometimes feel like we need to go back to that kind of work.
Yeah.
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 um,
You get some of it nowadays, but it's
Mm,
definitely still few and far between.
yeah.
yeah. And yeah,
Well,
Raiders
especially
just
with the
like
new one, I'm interested to see how they do that. I know they obviously are de-aging him for a bit, but I wonder if they're gonna kind of go back to that filmmaking style, because that's what I think of when I think of Indiana Jones, is kind of more handmade feel, not CGI fest. And I think that's why a lot of people didn't like Crystal Skull, because there was a lot of CGI. So
Yeah.
sorry.
Crystal Skull didn't feel as like visually gritty as well as the rest of it. Obviously that has to do with like the film versus digital, but I kind of hope that we do go back to that look, because I think my biggest critique of Crystal Skull, and I know I'm jumping a couple steps ahead of this podcast,
No, that's okay.
is like the visual look of it all. But yeah, for the first one, even when they went to Nepal and the way they introduced Marion's character of doing the shot
So good.
competition,
Yeah.
and like you just
Yeah.
instantly fall in love with her character. And
Mhm.
I wasn't around in the 80s, but I know for watching this like in the early 2000s, just to even have like a really badass female lead like Marion was, it was, yeah, I loved it as a kid. I loved her as a kid. I fell in love with that character. Seeing her come back in the fourth one was really special. I'm sure they're going to reference to her in the fifth one that's about to come out. I'd be surprised if they didn't.
Mhm.
Yeah, everything about the first one I think created a lot of how would you say it? Like it like like there's tropes in the industry. There's,
Yeah, it was
classic.
revolutionary.
Yeah, it like created a lot of, is that what I want to say? It created a lot of tropes. It created a lot of, not like tropes, but you know what I mean? Like it created.
Copycat
Yeah,
sort of
it
thing.
was like the benchmark, right? Like kind of like how Halloween like kind of pioneered the slasher genre, right?
Totally.
And everyone was trying to distill it ever since then. I think the Indiana Jones films are a great example of like that with the action adventure genre.
Mhm.
I
I
think
think it even has like a
more,
Western touch to it. I feel like the first one kind of has a Western touch to it. Even
Yeah,
like in the
totally.
reveal shot you were talking
Yeah.
about where he comes out of the shadow, or when
yeah,
they're in the bar
yeah,
scene and they kind of have that standoff. There's so many standoffs.
yeah, yeah. The
um,
duel, right? The duel in
hmm
Cairo.
yeah,
That's a cowboy duel.
definitely.
A hilarious cowboy duel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say probably if we want to like harp on it a little for low lights, I would say, I mean, like we touched on the CGI already, not aging super well. But I think one of the only big things that stood out for me was kind of the romance between Marion and Andy. Like I understand, and it probably was like way less noticeable at the time because that's just kind of how movies interpreted those types of relationships. But like it just doesn't feel quite as um, consensual, I guess. It like as maybe some uh, relationships who evoke that like I hate you, but like I'm also turned on by you type of like dynamic, right?
Yeah.
Um,
They definitely don't
it's a
have a
little
healthy
bit more.
relationship.
No, they definitely don't.
Yeah. It's definitely one of those
So I
things
mean,
where
in
like,
that sense,
yeah. It's like it's the
yeah,
playful ex-girlfriend
Yeah.
right. That's
like
true.
yeah, relationship thing.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I think all
Well,
three original movies kind of have that same kind of dynamic between Indy and the love
yes,
interest. So I mean, it's
they
not like
do.
they.
So that kind of
Yeah.
speaks to like uh the way, I don't know, because like it's also in a few other Harrison Ford movies, like even in Star Wars too.
Yep.
Like he
Yeah.
somehow gets these roles where like I don't know how much of it was his performance or if it was just like almost being typecast in a way, like kind of on the uh like in the behind the scene, not behind the scenes, but like for like character traits, I guess. Um or if that's more just a sign of the times and that's how the like rough grizzled manly protagonist is portrayed with a lot of his love interests. So
I feel like it could be a
um
combination of both. I feel
Yeah.
like
it
Harrison
could be.
Ford is one of those men, for me personally, is like the hero you never want to meet. I do believe,
Right.
like you're right, Nick. There is a pattern in Harrison Ford's characters with how he interacts and speaks with women, and like you can especially see that with like Princess Leia, where he's
Mhm.
just like, "I know you want me. I know you're saying you don't want me, but I know you want me."
Yeah.
And yeah, it doesn't age very well at all.
Yeah. It just highlights what the times were of like
Yeah.
the if she doesn't say yes the first time, keep trying, or if she keeps saying no, then keep trying, type of thing.
Definitely a
It's
different time
just
period.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, luckily it's not like it didn't age terribly. Like it's still relatively kind of portraying that like unhealthy relationship, kind of like you said,
Yeah.
of a crazy or not crazy ex-girlfriend, but like an ex-girlfriend.
Well, when it opens, like when we meet Marion for the first time, Indy was quite persistent. Like, you're not going to come with me. I just need this. What was it? Like,
Yeah,
scrap of
that's true.
piece? Like, I just need
Yeah,
this from you. And she was just like, I'm not leaving without it. She insisted to be on that whole trip without him.
that's true. Very true.
But I definitely know what you mean. Even, and I'm pretty sure she kissed him in the submarine. Correct me if I'm wrong.
In the sub. Oh, right. Yeah, yeah. When they're doing the classic woman
Smoke the
healing
mirrors
up
is
the man.
violence.
Yes. However, whenever we get around to Temple of Doom, I'm pretty sure Indy kidnapped her.
Yeah.
He sure did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's honestly probably one of the only lowlights for me. Everything else is like almost timeless virtually. I love the antagonists, everything from the rival like
Belloc.
archaeologist.
Bella.
Yeah, Belloc.
Such a good
And
name.
the evil was he like an evil Nazi doctor? The creepy dude with the imprint on his hand.
Was he a doctor?
I don't know. He was creepy. That's all that really matters.
I honestly
Creepy
didn't
Nazi
even really
guy.
know what his whole deal with, like, why was he
Yeah.
there outside of just being creepy?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Exactly. But yeah, so many amazing set pieces that are so memorable all these years later. A fantastic intro sequence with like little to no dialogue too, right? Like that's not something you see all the time nowadays either.
Well, I think Shay nailed it. It's definitely like a Western intro. Like the whole first
Totally.
25, 30 minutes feels like a Clint Eastwood movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. All right. Well, I think we've praised Raiders enough.
I appreciate that
Let's
criticism,
move on.
Nick. It does deserve that criticism for sure.
Yeah, if nothing else, acknowledgement, right? Like it's just like noticing that it's like, oh man, something like that probably would not fly today.
And it only gets worse in the next two movies when it comes to love interest.
Ooh, yeah. It also jumping ahead a little bit more. Last Crusade, I completely forgot that him and his dad both slept with the same woman. Like, what the fuck?
And not only the same woman, but a Nazi.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think she was an outright Nazi if we want to get down to brass tacks, but she was an accomplice to Nazis. Yeah. So basically the same thing.
Yeah, she's a Nazi.
Yeah.
You're either a Nazi or you're not.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Temple of Doom. This one was rough on the rewatch. I do kind of appreciate just speaking to some of the highlights a little bit. I do appreciate the like prequel nature of this film. I mean, it only takes place like a year before Raiders, but seeing Indy a little bit more like he's like clumsier and like still trying to like find his footing with like on these adventures, which is really, really fun and a different side we didn't really get to see in the first film. Is him failing a lot more, but I think the like standout highlight for me, which even has some of its downsides as well, is Short Round and Indy.
Yeah.
Like their dynamic together is like
part of the entire
perfect.
movie, easily.
100%.
Yeah. I wish it was just them, like going on an adventure together, and it really like I still hope and think they could like bring Ke Huy Quan back to like take over. That would be so cool if it was like him going on these adventures now. But yeah, that's easily my favorite part of this film. Some of the set pieces are really cool, and there's still a lot of
Holy One
that.
is awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Also, like, why was there an entire dance number inside of that, like,
I know.
dragon mouth thing? Like, why?
I know. It's so
It's
bad.
like
ridiculous.
it's like a 3-minute long dance number, and
Oh,
it
yeah.
has nothing to do with the film. Like,
It has
we
nothing
go
to do with
in
the
and then we
film.
come back out.
And it's just like all cultural
Anything goes.
appropriation, and like it's just like it's bad for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, that's easily the biggest low light for me in this film is
The
just the overall like
overall
racial
Racism.
racism. Yeah, we won't mince words. It's a lot of cultural appropriation, a lot of non-Indian actors playing Indians, um, a lot of like stereotypes with like, because like even I love Short Round, but like he like referencing fortune cookies and like having that like stereotypical accent and everything.
Yeah,
It
and they villainize Asian folk a lot outside of Short Round's
right.
character. Like,
Yeah.
what was his name?
Yeah.
Lao Chow, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was just
Yeah, yeah.
all dialed up way too many notches, and
Yeah. Yeah, it was weird that the whole film is like uh stereotypes and archetypes just distilled down to their essence,
oh, for
like
sure.
to
Even
a like a extreme extent.
like
Yeah.
Willie as a
Oh
character
god.
was just
Actually, well, okay, like
sorry.
racism
I'm
for sure is
hijacking.
like one of the biggest down
Willie's number
sides to
2.
the film, but Willie is close second. My god, I could not stand
But she was designed for
Willie.
nobody to like stand. Like her whole character
Yeah.
was designed for us to just be like annoyed with her. Like she's that stereotypical woman that you have to take along, and you're basically just like the whole comedic part that she was written for was just like, oh, like this is if you brought your wife along with like to like a
Right.
fishing trip or
Yeah.
something. Like
Yeah.
it is.
And like it sucks because like you could do that, but then give her dimension and like give her more to do than just being a fish out of water and screaming her head off for half the film. Like quite literally, I think she has
Than
more.
half.
Yeah, she screams more than she speaks in the film.
Yeah. She's
It's
like
brutal.
she was Steven Spielberg's wife.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. I found that out recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was rough. Their whole Willie and Indy's random love affair in the middle of the whole like it's again that same like toxic relationship dynamic, but like then out of nowhere once they get to the like the city and they're like shacking up in their bedrooms, then it's like it's like a light switch. There's no lead up to like, oh, I'm into you now. It's like I hate you one minute, and then it's like what, like they're talking dirty to each other the next. It's like what is going on?
In what world are you just, you're at work, you're doing a gig, and a fight breaks out. And I understand the reason why she's included in that fight, because she had the antidote and Indy was poisoned. So I understand the initial connection that the filmmakers were trying to do between the characters. But the second, which like 5 to 10, maybe 10 minutes into the entire film, when she passes over the antidote over to Indy, there was no reason for her to be in the rest of the film. Why was she brought into the airplane? Why was she jumping out of the airplane with them? Like, why was she there?
Yeah.
He didn't consent to any of that.
Totally, yeah. He literally slings her over his shoulder and runs away with her. It's brutal.
Yeah.
It's
so ridiculous.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
I do like some of the set pieces though, and the like setting of it all. Like the minecart sequence is really cool.
Right.
The bridge sequence is fantastic. Like for all of its cultural appropriation and racism, the intro is cool. Like it's it's almost straight out of a James Bond movie, right?
Yeah.
Like
it does have more of a James Bond touch, for sure.
Yeah. And the plane sequence is also really fun, of the boat falling from like 1,000 feet in the air and then into a river in
Very
the middle of
similar
the
to
jungle.
the Crystal
Yeah.
Skulls atomic bomb and going
Yeah.
into
In the
fridge. Like
fridge.
those kind of ridiculous indie ideas.
Yeah.
They're timeless.
What else? I mean, okay, I've kind of dominated the conversation for Temple of Doom for the most part. Shay, do you have any other lowlights or highlights you wanted to touch on for Temple of Doom?
I think Temple of Doom was one that I try to rewatch. I rewatch most of them, like at least on an annual basis, but I think this one was at the more recent rewatch that I've had, and I had a harder time getting through it.
Yeah.
Biggest low light of the entire film, I think, is when they're eating food at the palace.
Yeah, right.
I
Yeah.
think
So
that was
bad.
pretty unforgivable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, outside of Short Round and Indy, I think okay, this is kind of be like I'm gonna objectify Harrison Ford a little bit, but you know what, he kind of deserves it at this point. Um, after all the things that he's done to his all the women in his movies, the most attractive I've ever been to that man is the bridge sequence when his shirt
Oh
is
yeah.
like, torn off
I'll
and like
second that.
Yeah.
yeah, that is my favorite like overall shot of like mental image of Indiana Jones is the bridge
Yeah.
sequence. Like that
All
that's
sweaty with his shirt ripped. He's got
Yeah.
a big sword.
exactly. Yeah. That was great. I remember really liking the whole sequence, the mine sequence when they're on the
Hmm.
how would you say it? Not like a
Just like
roller
in the
coaster.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like the minecart track chase.
Yeah, which was also kind of cute and funny because for visual effects, that one didn't. Well, the practical effects of that did not age very well because you could tell in some spots when they're just dolls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They are like ruthless to the henchmen in this film.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
you see minecarts flipping over and like
Flipping, yeah.
exploding, and then like the crocodiles at the end are like ripping people
Or the
apart.
rock crusher. Like,
the rock crusher.
The rock crusher, yeah. Oh my
scared me
god.
so much.
Although I actually kind of like that little note. I mean, it's very morbid, but like during that fight, it's like once that dude like gets his scarf snagged or his
Yeah.
turban snagged, he's like pleading Indy to try and help him, and Indy actually is like, okay, I'll help you, and yeah, like I won the fight, but like you do not need to die this way, my guy.
I think Harrison Ford broke his back in that sequence, if I'm correct. I think he was
Seriously?
back. Yeah,
he
they
was
had
hurting during
Holy
this.
crap.
Most of
They
it
had-
is
Damn.
stuntmen. Yeah.
Yeah, they had a stuntman come in for that one, and he was off for a significant amount of time during production. I
Wow.
forget what
I did
happened,
not
but
know
it was the rock crushing sequence.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're absolutely relentless. Also, like speaking back to the suspension of disbelief a little bit too, like that whole mind track sequence, like as cool as it is, it was like, would it really be set up this way? Like it's
No.
so weird.
Well, I mean, the voodoo dolls too. I mean, there's so much suspension of disbelief in this movie.
Yeah, this is like the arguably one of the more supernatural of the films. But yeah, also something that like bugged me a little bit is at the end with the crocodiles and like that whole the cliff area. It's like it was very jarring to me because like in some shots it would look like it's like hundreds of thousands of feet like deep, that like canyon, but then like you see people falling and it's like maybe a few hundred feet and then they're getting ripped to shreds by crocodiles. It was like it was very jarring. I think the perspective could have been a little better. It was just so weird. It was like Looney Tunes, like straight out of
Yeah.
Wile E. Coyote, like millions of feet down, but
definitely.
then not in the next shot. Minor gripe. Yeah, Cole, do you have anything else you want to touch on with Temple of Doom?
Yeah, I mean the biggest reason I watch is just to watch Short Round. Other
Yeah.
than that, yeah, I mean it's not great. And we touched on James Bond. I think the Willie angle is very much a Bond kind of thing with like the Bond
Oh
girl. Like
yeah.
Right.
that's what it feels like to me, where it's like
Oh
she's
yeah.
there
Hmm.
just to be the love interest, and they don't
Hmm.
set her up at all to be a love interest. She just kind of is, which happens a lot in James Bond movies, especially in the old ones. So that's kind of what I get out of it. But yeah, it's definitely not the best Indiana Jones movie. I mean, it's still required viewing just because Short Round, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely on par more with Kingdom of Crystal Skull than Crusade or Raiders. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
I do think
Totally.
they're very comparable. Now that you said that, Nick, like they are kind
Yeah.
of up par with each other. And if you didn't watch Temple of Doom as a kid, watching it now, you could arguably even say it's worse than Crystal Skull.
yeah,
Probably. Yeah.
yeah,
It
there's
only has
definitely
the nostalgia factor.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's definitely parts that are better and better in each movie and worse in each. So I mean, they're very similar in terms of the good and the bad. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of a Star Wars saga situation now, uh, where like if you actually watched them in timeline order, with the exception of Crystal Skull, I would say you're only going up in quality. So,
yeah,
um, yeah, Short Round was fantastic. I love that he actually plays like a part. Like he saves Indy multiple times. He like saves all the child slaves in the mine, and he like fights the brainwashed prince and everything. Like he
he's
plays a
definitely the
bigger
heartbeat
part.
of the movie.
Totally, yeah. Like that. Oh, that scene where they like hug after Indy snaps out of it, and he's like, "I love you, Indy." It's like, oh,
I
so
Yeah,
know.
good.
it's so good.
Cool. All right, let's move on to the Last Crusade, my personal favorite of the
Yeah.
franchise. Um, man, so
Pretty
good.
damn good.
It's so funny. It's easily the
It's
funniest
so
movie. I
funny. It's
I die every
hilarious.
time I watch this movie. Sean Connery
Yeah,
and
No,
man.
Harrison Ford are
why?
Yeah,
Yeah, like that's the reason why it's like I feel like it for an audience, it kind of it's gonna appease more of a broader audience because a lot of its comedy
probably.
is based between like a father son or just parent child dynamic outside of
Yeah,
just the basic, and we've seen it time over time again of just like this woman is screaming,
yeah.
like
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
like it
yeah.
definitely does have better relationships in the film.
Yeah, for sure. I love Indy's like persona when he gets to the castle. It's like we are here to see the tapestries. Oh,
Yeah.
that's so
And
good. I
and
completely
Brody
forgot
getting
about
lost in
that.
his own museum, that one kills me every single
That's so
time. He's got a
good.
map, he's asking
Funny.
where to go. I'd lose it every time. It's so funny.
Yeah. Um yeah, it's very good. I really actually enjoy the flashback sequence that starts the movie off.
Yeah.
Oh
It's
my
one of
god,
those that
yes, sorry.
yeah,
Sorry.
the no, it's okay.
I forgot about River
It's
Phoenix.
something we
I don't know how.
it's something that like it was kind of probably one of the first, if not the first, like films to do that kind of trope of like flashing back to see how a character became who they are with all their
Yeah.
like iconography, like the hat and the whip and everything, right? And like even down to like the little scar on his
Scar.
chin, right?
Yeah.
It's such a great like setup and intro to the film. Like it's an exhilarating like sequence.
Yeah.
I
I feel
also
like
love
all four movies do that really well. All of them have a great opening sequence that really draws you in.
I
Like
agree.
Temple of Doom
Mhm.
kind
Yeah.
of falters with the dance, but after that it's really good. So I mean,
Yeah.
I know Crystal Skull gets shit on, but the opening sequence is probably the best part of that entire movie for me. So
Yeah.
yeah, they
I
nail
agree.
that, especially in this one.
Yeah.
Hmm. For sure. It's yeah, it's really cool. The whole like circus train car sequence is great.
We learn why
You
he's
get to
terrified of
see how he
snakes.
got his fear of snakes, right?
Yeah. Well, it's even great at the beginning when he picks up saying he's like, it's only a snake, and then he's terrified like 20
Yeah.
minutes later.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. It's so cool. It it's a great like mood setter for the film because even that sequence alone has a lot of comedy in it, right?
Yeah.
His friend coming to like his house and blowing the like trumpet in his face. Yeah, great. And then I love it, the like cut between like past Indy and like current Indy on the ship.
Yeah.
Like, and I completely forgot about that sequence too. Like, that's an amazing, and like I can't even like fathom how much work went into that sequence alone. Like the like sheer amount of gallons of water being thrown onto Harrison Ford and all of the other actors in that sequence. It's so good. And we get the iconic "It belongs in a museum" line.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Cole, do you want to jump in with any specific
Sure. I mean,
highlights?
this is kind of like Raiders for me, where it's like you start and you just can't stop watching until the end. Like set piece after set piece, the entirety of Venice is great. Like the boat chase is awesome.
Yeah.
Like
Takes a
underneath in
really
the
cool turn
tubes.
that I forgot about too, about the
Yeah.
Templar protectors, right?
Yeah, like that whole angle is really cool. Like, yeah, and we mentioned obviously Harrison Ford and Indy with his Scottish accent. That is awesome. And then when we finally get to Sean Connery, like after that, like it's so good. Sean Connery, I mean, we've talked about kind of Harrison Ford's characters. I mean, Sean Connery was just a dickhead in real life, so I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's what it is. But I mean, in this movie, he's so good, and he makes me laugh constantly. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
the whole dynamic, like with every character he's with, the dynamic between Sean Connery and whoever he's with is awesome. Like, it's
Yeah.
they nailed this movie, and especially like coming out of Temple of Doom, where it's so dark, it's such a
Hmm.
vast shift compared to those two movies. Like, it's actually kind of wild.
Yeah. Up until like really even that last the last sequence in the Grail room, like there's really not that much explicit like violence as much, I would say, or like dark tone, because like you get that like dark moment of the monkey being poisoned in Raiders, right?
Yeah.
And the like kidnapping and everything, but like there's not as much outright like brutal violence, I would say, at least to my recent memory anyway.
No.
But yeah, it's very lighthearted. It's a hilarious like dynamic between them. The fireplace sequence is so good
So
with the
good.
lighter,
Yeah.
and it just inflames the entire
It's
room.
so good.
Yeah. What else? Shay, do you want to jump in with any specific highlights at all?
Yeah, I mean, River Phoenix is obviously a highlight. Rest in peace.
Hmm.
I yeah, the whole dynamic between um Sean Connery and Harrison Ford is just perfect. The way Harrison Ford screams "Dad," like so annoyed all the time. Um,
Yeah,
I have no fucking clue. Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to cuss on this. I'm
you're
pretty
very
sure I
much
have
allowed. Go
anyways.
for it.
I have no clue on how either of the characters didn't know that the woman that they were sleeping with was a Nazi. I don't know what kind of conversations these people have, but like typically you can pick up pretty damn fast or
Yeah.
relatively fast if somebody is on that side. And
Hmm.
clearly they couldn't see past her good looks. Although I remember as a kid, Dr. Elsa Schneider was definitely somebody who I like that's when my sexuality was starting to get really fucking confused because I was just, like in love with that character so
Yeah,
much.
yeah,
And then I just kind of loved that she was bad and she turned out like at least she had more dimension than the other previous love
yeah,
interests. I know that kind of depth is not what we look for in characters that we love, but at least she wasn't just, the side piece throughout the entire
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
She
exactly.
which I appreciated, and even the
She
way that
had
they
motivations we understood, right?
yeah, exactly. And they I honestly think they could have, well, I'm sure we all agree with this, but the the way that The Last Crusade wrapped up, the last shot was so beautiful, and
Oh
they could have
yeah.
left it like that, and that would have been like the perfect bow on the trilogy and the character.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
love that the film also had a lot of one thing I really love Indy is like his horseback riding sequences. It does give it more of like
Yeah.
a Western feel, and there was just
Mhm.
so much of it in like the latter third, with
Yeah.
like driving the tank and like jumping off
That
a
tank
tank onto a
sequence
horse.
really rivals
So good.
the truck sequence in Raiders. Like
Yeah.
those are pretty on par with each other, I would say. That
Definitely.
is so good.
Yeah, yeah, they jump around everywhere from Venice to oh frick was
I don't know if I'm going to be much help. I know they can, or they go to Jordan, I think, because that's where
yes,
the
Jordan.
temple is, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you even get like a little snippet of like on the sea, right? With that, I guess it's kind of a flashback in a way, or it's cut with the flashback on the boat. The blimp sequence was really good. No ticket.
No ticket. Oh, I forgot about the
Everyone brings their tickets up.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. A
Oh, and the
lot of
library sequence where he's scared
the
of rats.
library sequence is really cool.
Yeah.
This, I think, it's my favorite like execution of like the treasure hunting adventure aspect of these movies. Crystal Skull actually does quite a decent job as well, but this is just easily my favorite of like solving riddles, and like the production design makes use of those story beats as well, with like X marks the spot on the floor of the library, right?
Mm.
The whole catacomb sequence too was really cool. And yeah, but that whole dynamic of Indy and his dad really ties the whole film together really well. And I just love the like the adventure of the Holy Grail too. Like I
Yeah.
love the it like played with that like balance that Raiders had of like realism paired with the like supernatural a little bit too. I think it
Mhm.
was a really well done um, mixing of the two feels, which is really cool. And yeah, that's where we would cap it off. But we've got one more film to talk about, Crystal Skull. Um, Shay, do you want to kick things off with this one?
This one I haven't rewatched in a couple years. However, I have seen it enough to definitely be able to talk about it. I remember seeing it in theaters, as I was mentioning previously, in 2008. I remember walking away extremely disappointed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it just again, as I was saying, it didn't feel like an indie movie
Mhm.
at times. I have come to forgiven it a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
as I aged. Obviously, like when you're 13, 14 years old, you're going to be less forgiving of
Right.
things. Um and now kind of seeing it as I'm older, I'm like, you know what? When you really break it down to its script, it's not a whole lot different than the original trilogy. It was
Mm-hmm.
given a really hard time for having like the alien twist
Mm-hmm.
at the end, but you know, what's the difference of that and you know, these ghosts flying over out of like the ark and all of these other
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
There's really no big difference.
Yeah.
Sorry to any cast
I
who might be listening, but in yeah.
I think it could have played really well if that was like, I don't know. I said in like my letterboxd review for it that I think the El Dorado City of Gold plot and the alien plot maybe could have been split, like, and they should have been just one or the other maybe, in order to maybe give it enough dimension and development to be intriguing. I think the alien thing could have worked really well if, uh, or no, I think it could have worked really well because the whole 50s era aesthetic is really like well done, and it's
Mhm,
played throughout the whole film really well. So I think it could have easily lent itself to that kind of tone and feel.
mhm,
um, but paired together and just almost only serving as like a twist at the end isn't great. I understand what they were going for with the kind of like evoking that same brutality of like how the first, or I guess 1 and 3 kind of end, right? With like the antagonists succumbing to the horrors of their treasure, basically.
I do
But
want to also shout out. I know Shia LaBeouf is not the greatest guy. I definitely have a different perspective of him now. But at the time when I watched it, I really liked him in his character. I know he got a lot of criticism for it. I thought he did a really good job. I really liked that they were kind of teasing that he would be kind of the next young Indy. Thankfully, we'll never see that. I don't think Disney will ever touch him again.
yeah,
And
probably not.
I think the biggest highlight that I have is Kate Blanchett. I think that's enough said.
It's hard to argue there. I would only say, I mean, you can't go wrong with Kate Blanchett. Let me just put that out there first. I think her character could have maybe had a little bit more improvement if like they had just kind of let her ham it up like 150%.
Yeah.
Like that would have been great. Or if they had gone the opposite route and made her like a terrifying villain.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
And
She
like
didn't really. Sorry.
No, that's okay. She like could have maybe like upped the stakes a little bit more of like killing off one of Indy's like compatriots, right? Or doing something to show how menacing she is and how like willing to do whatever it takes to get to the end goal. She kind of just rode in that middle zone for me a lot throughout the film.
The character
But Kate
definitely was
Blanchett really like carried her through and made me like her enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good point. The character did kind of remain in a very like safe zone in the sense of like they could have amped it up a bit on like comedic level, or they
Right.
could have made her a lot more menacing. I 100% agree with that. Yeah, but it being Kate Blanchett,
Yeah.
yeah, it's probably the
That's
only
enough
reason.
alone, really.
Yeah, and the sword fight sequence that Kate had with
Ooh,
Shia,
so good.
yeah,
That was one of my favorite parts of the movie.
so good.
Like, say what you will about like all the CGI and whatnot, but like conceptually, that was a really cool chase sequence and like fight.
Yeah.
The
And it's
vine
like
swinging is a
built up
little
to
much, though.
Yeah,
that takes it over the edge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cole, do you have any thoughts you want to get in there?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Shay. I think Shy was pretty good in the movie. I don't see really any fault in the acting side from there. Like, obviously not a great person, but yeah, kind of the same thing as Sean Connery. I like the father son dynamic. Obviously, you don't really know it's father son until the end, but I like that. The chase sequence and the fight with the greasers and like the preppy guys.
Oh,
That
I
is
love
awesome.
that
I
scene
love that.
so much.
So good.
And then when they're riding the motorcycle through the library and they fall off, and that girl like asks Indy questions about school, I love that part. So yeah, chase sequences. There's a lot of good ones in there. Even like the fight in the desert at Area 51 is great. That whole intro sequence, we've talked about that, and I already said I loved it. So there's that. The aliens I was kind of turned off to at the end, but again, like we said, it is very similar. Like all the movies kind of end very similar in that regard, where there's some kind of supernatural force, or something is going on with stones or the Ark of the Covenant, whatever. So I mean, it's a little out there, but at the same time, it's really not for an Indiana Jones movie. But yeah, I think it's kind of on par with Temple of Doom. There's lots of good, there's lots of bad. Somewhere in the middle, there was probably a really good movie, and they kind of strayed a little bit too far. And yeah, like it doesn't necessarily feel like the first three movies either. Like there's not a grittiness, like you said. That's what I noticed too when I rewatch it. It definitely feels like a 2000s movie compared to like an 80s movie, like just with film and digital. Obviously, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not a film guy like you guys, so I don't know if there was something they could have done to make it feel like an 80s movie or not, but that's definitely noticeable.
Yeah.
Well, just the tech at the time for like all the CGI and whatnot still wasn't quite there, I don't think. Or if, although, I mean, like, I say that because, like, things like Iron Man and I think the first Transformers even, like, still looked relatively good, CGI wise. So I think maybe just a better allocation of those resources could have made it better,
I think it was
and
one of
just
those.
leaning on that balance of the practical and the visual, right?
Mhm.
Like they could have, they should have made the aliens like ET like models, man. Like that would have been cool. Not
Yeah.
literally, but like just physical things on set that they could interact with, and like
Yeah.
animatronics, right? That'd be so cool.
I think it was one of those times where with CGI, like you're totally right, Iron Man aged really well, but you have to like allocate an extreme amount of your budget towards
Hmm.
that, and it's rather you go all in financially on it or it's going to look how it looks.
Yeah,
Um, we're in a different age
exactly.
now where you can different tiers of budgets can get you a very similar look arguably.
Yeah.
But yeah, at that time it was definitely like you had to go all or nothing and they were kind of in a weird spot. Yeah, I do kind of wish that they had more of an indie look towards the whole thing. I'm not sure if we're going to
Yeah.
get that in Dial of Destiny. You can kind
Yeah,
of
we'll
see
see.
it with the how they're bringing back his old face and stuff. Like those are the moments in the trailer where you're like, oh, like that's they know what they're doing. They're
Hmm.
touching all the nostalgic heartstrings and such. But
Yeah, yeah.
I am that scene that you're talking about where they're doing the motorcycle chase. I love that shot as well.
Hmm.
But I remember also watching it and be like, this doesn't really feel like an Indiana Jones film. Like it's goofy, but it feels like I'm watching, as you kind of said, Cole, like it's an early 2000s film. And there's also moments in Dial of Destiny where it kind of had a similar thing where it's like there's like a parade sequence or
Yeah.
something that they keep referring to, or like the horse in the subway system, where I'm like, this is starting to give me Crystal Skull vibes.
Hmm.
It's not giving me that kind of earthy feel, but
Yeah, I'm wondering how rooted in the 1930s the character of Indy and the Indy films are. Like, I wonder how far you can push that envelope of like setting Indy in different time periods, right? Like,
Yeah.
because I mean, like, I personally love the like 50s era aesthetic, like I kind of already said, and I think it still could have worked, but I don't know how much farther you could push Indy in terms of era and have it still evoke that same tone.
mhm.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, it's strange. I think you could probably cheat it a little bit if you were to push the era and just have him be more worldly, right? Like don't have it set in as much of just like modern day America, whatever era that is that he's in. Um, because the 1930s look in America is very tied to those first three films, right? Or I guess first two, because Temple of Doom, I don't think it takes place at all in America. But yeah, I will say I think tonally it still nailed it for me in Crystal Skull. But I would agree that that CGI gets pushed, the boundaries get pushed a lot, and the believability gets pushed a lot. Like the Nuketown sequence with the fridge
Yeah.
for sure. The vine swinging at the end, even like the some of the like Aztec temple moments as well felt
Mhm.
very weird. Like Indy's like standing on a cliff and the debris is flying around the flying saucer, but like none of it hits them at all. Like he's just standing there vibing. Like what's going on?
Yeah. Just hanging.
Um, yeah. So I would say the shot. I mean, I would assume you guys probably would agree, but like the Shia Ford dynamic didn't work as well for me. I think beyond that kind of little twist of him being Indy's son, I don't think there was a ton there for me. But I mean, I did really enjoy the conversation between Indy, Marion, and what was his name, Mutt, I think, in the back of that truck. That was really good.
Mhm.
Right before that whole chase sequence starts. But yeah, outside of that, it wasn't. There wasn't that much there for me. Um, what's his name? John Hurt's character was pretty one note for me. I love John Hurt. It's kind of same vein as Kate Blanchett. Like John Hurt is fantastic. His voice is otherworldly, but his character was kind of one note. It was like, I'm a crazy guy, and then you get that little twist at the end. But like, it really didn't do much for me. I would have much preferred him be like what was his name? Brody?
Yeah. Adrian
In
Brody.
yeah. Be like an actual like involved compatriot. I would have preferred that to the double agent guy that we got. He was kind of take it or leave it for me as well. But yeah, that's kind of where we land with Crystal Skull. Any other last notes before we start wrapping things up?
I think the last note that I'll give it, and its criticism, is the last shot. I was just saying how I liked when Shia picked up the hat. That I didn't have a problem with. The fact that they decided to marry Marion and Indy
Oh, right.
was unnecessary.
Yeah, it was like them kind
was
of trying to
wild, yeah.
force like a happily ever after kind of ending, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was forced and unnecessary. And kind of as we were speaking earlier, Indy and Marion, I think, will always kind of have that dynamic of playful exes that will never
Mhm.
work, but they'll always
Yeah.
have that chemistry. And I love those kind of relationships in movies, like, when like there's like a shit ton of chemistry, but they're just not logical together. They don't
Mhm.
fit. They wouldn't, and they decided to just kind of, I don't know, go with a very classic, not even classic, just unoriginal ending, and
Mhm.
it didn't work for me.
Yeah. Yeah, rewatching Crystal Skull, it feels it's weird, like hindsight wise, of like that scene of Shia picking up the hat because like he picks it up and he almost puts it on, but then Harrison Ford snags it out of his hand. Out of his hand, it's like, nope, you don't get to do that, son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
That's
gonna
where it
be
should have
Harrison
just
Ford.
ended.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, overall, not as awful as the kind of zeitgeist says it is, or the like. It doesn't live up to the reputation it's built over the last dozen or so years. It's still like a fun adventure, and it certainly like does a better job in some respects than a lot of like the legacy sequels that have come out in like the last 5 to 10 years. Um, so yeah, overall still a fun adventure, but
Yeah.
has some shortcomings for sure. So yeah, that's kind of where we're going to wrap up this franchise in review. Um, Still a great franchise overall. I'm sure I will revisit the trilogy uh, dozens of times in the future. I may just end up doing more of a Raiders and a Last Crusade type rewatch here and there, um, and maybe occasionally revisit Temple of Doom and Crystal Skull every like dozen years or something. But yeah, that is where we're gonna call it. Shay and Cole, thank you so much for joining me in this first episode, I guess, in this series of franchise and reviews. Um, Stay tuned because they might also be joining me for the Dial of Destiny review, depending on how all of our schedules line up and everything. Um, but yeah, cautious optimism, I would say, going into Dial of Destiny. Not expecting a ton. It will be a bittersweet goodbye to Harrison Ford as the character, and I
Mhm.
am excited to see Phoebe Waller-Bridge. She looks like a promising part of that film for sure.
Definitely.
And yeah, so Shay, where can the people find you? And do you have any recommendations?
Ooh, I did not prepare myself for recommendations, but the folks can find me at Shay Martin Media on Instagram, and I believe it's just Shay Martin on Letterbox.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And Cole, where can the people find you?
Yeah, Instagram Cole Parkinson 4 recommendation. I don't think I have anything. Oh, I'm going to see Blink next Friday, so go out and listen to some Blink 182. There you go.
Oh, nice.
Oh, nice. Good
I
stuff.
got a busy
That was
weekend. Blink-182 on Friday, then Indiana Jones on one of the other days. So
oh
there
my
we go.
God, that's like
That's a great
you
weekend.
distilled into a weekend.
Oh
My
man,
Pretty
God,
much.
you got to fit some Fallout in there somewhere,
Yeah.
and then you're good.
Probably.
before I
Restart The
lose
Last
And
of
The
y'all,
Us.
Last of Us, of course. Yeah.
before I lose y'all, I had like the one of the best and then worst text messages ever. I have a friend who works at ILM, and she texted me, and she was like, ILM employees can bring like a +1 to like a private screening of the new
Nice.
Indiana Jones movie. Like, do you want to
Oh,
come with
shit.
me? And then she immediately followed up, and she's like, "Oh shit, I forgot I'm out of town. Sorry."
Oh, come
What
on.
the fuck?
That is brutal.
Yeah,
Can she just give you like her ID card or something and then be like, I'm her +1?
I wish. I have no clue. Like that's a low blow. That's
Yeah, that's the ultimate tease. My goodness.
yeah. She just got too excited
Um,
to tell me.
yeah, I guess so. All right. You can find me wherever you're listening to or watching. I guess, no, this won't be a listening, or this won't be a podcast form. I think this is going to be a video exclusive for the YouTube channel. So be sure to stay tuned to the YouTube channel for more franchise and reviews. I'm going to do a Mission Impossible franchise and review. Shay is also slotted in for that one as well. So be on the lookout for that. Also be on the lookout for the Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny review coming to the channel. I should have uploaded a review for Wes Anderson's latest film, Asteroid City, by the time this video is up. So be sure to go give that a watch or listen if you so wish. As far as the regular No Score review show goes, you can find it on the YouTube channel or on your favorite podcast listening services. There will be more summer movie reviews coming soon. Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning, Oppenheimer, Barbie, lots of good stuff to come still this summer. So until then, you can follow me on all the socials at No Score or at No Score Reviews. And quick shout out to the gaming channel. If you're into indie game Let's Play content, you can go check out at No Score Plays. And thank you to my lovely guests once more. And also let us know what your favorite Indiana Jones film is and what are some of your highlights or lowlights for the franchise as a whole. Be happy to engage in that conversation with you. So until then, we'll catch you all in the next review. Bye-bye.
Later.